92% of Americans under 40 have a net worth below $100,000. Not because they earn too little, because the gap between what they earn and what they spend is effectively zero. And the portion of that group earning over $70,000 a year is frankly embarrassing to look at. Here's what nobody leads with. The 3 signs you are financially ahead of the people around you look nothing like winning. They look like restraint, social awkwardness, and quiet discomfort. One of them is something you've probably been embarrassed about for years, something your friends interpret as falling behind that is actually the most reliable behavioral predictor of long-term wealth accumulation that exists in the research. There is a dinner that happens somewhere in America every single Friday night. The same dinner. Let me describe it precisely. 5 people, mid-30s, all earning somewhere between $70,000 and $95,000 a year, sit down at a moderately decent restaurant. Not fancy, the kind of place where a cocktail is $16 and entrees are in the mid-30s. The conversation moves through leased cars, a trip someone booked on a rewards card, a jacket another person bought because the brand was doing a sale. The check comes. $83 per person after tax and tip. Everyone pulls out a card without discussion, without pause, without calculation. One person at the table is doing math in his head. He drove a 2018 Honda CR-V he bought used for $15,800 in cash 3 years ago. His outfit is perfectly decent. He ordered what he actually wanted, not the most expensive thing on the menu, because he has been doing mental budgeting since his late 20s, and it is now automatic, like breathing. He feels, sitting there, like he has not quite figured it out yet, like maybe the life his friends are living is the correct version of adult success, and he has made a series of miscalculations somewhere along the way. He has not. He is the only person at that table building anything that will last. His 4 companions are performing wealth. He is accumulating it. And by the time they all turn 60, the gap between those 2 approaches will be, conservatively, $2 million, given comparable income trajectories and no dramatic changes in behavior. This is how that happens. The 3 signs I'm about to describe come from Federal Reserve data, behavioral economics research, and the kind of pattern recognition that accumulates after a decade in business surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who see the numbers behind the lifestyle, people who can look at how someone talks about money and tell you within 10 minutes whether they are building something real or producing an elaborate performance of it. I have had multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in the market long enough to know the difference between theory and what actually shows up in account balances at year 20. These signs are not about picking the right stocks or understanding esoteric tax structures. They are about the relationship between money and psychology. And most people get that relationship catastrophically wrong, not because they are not intelligent, but because nobody ever explains the mechanism. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically broken. They ignore sequence of returns risk and use withdrawal rate assumptions that have not been accurate since the 90s. Mine uses BlackRock and Vanguard modeling logic to identify the structural weak points in your specific plan. I only need your email to send the report because I do not store your financial data on my end. Link is in the description. Now, hold one image in your mind for the rest of this video. An iceberg, 10% above the waterline, 90% below. The visible part is your car, your wardrobe, your vacation posts, your restaurant habits, the watch on your wrist. The invisible part is your net worth, your investment accounts, your paid off assets, the interest compounding in an account you set up 2 years ago and rarely check. The entire machinery of consumer culture, every advertisement, every influencer post, every leased vehicle in a respectable neighborhood exists to get you to spend money on the 10%. Because visible consumption is the only part the social comparison engine can process. Nobody at that dinner table is calculating your 401k balance and adjusting their assessment of you accordingly. They are reading the car, the outfit, the order. They are reading the surface. Here is the critical thing about icebergs that the Titanic story gets at cleanly. The visible tip tells you almost nothing about the mass below. 2 icebergs can look identical from above the waterline and be completely different in actual size. The people at that table performing wealth spending heavily on signal are showing you their 10%. Their 90% is shallow or empty, or in some cases, negative. Your 90% is growing below the waterline, where compounding actually happens. I will return to that phrase throughout this video because it is the most useful 3-word filter for evaluating any financial decision. Does this purchase grow what is below the waterline? Or does it add to the 10% that does not compound? Now, before I get to sign one, here's something worth understanding. What I am about to describe first is a symptom. The real mechanism, the underlying behavioral shift that separates the people who build genuine wealth from the people who earn well and accumulate almost nothing, is the second sign. I am starting with the symptom because it is the cleaner entry point. But do not leave before sign 2, because sign 2 is where the math gets uncomfortable in a way that changes how you see your entire financial situation. And in a few minutes, I'm going to give you a Federal Reserve statistic about 6-figure earners that is going to make everything I say about checking accounts land very differently. Stay with me. Sign 1. Your money feels invisible because it is working. Here is what this looks like in practice. Wednesday afternoon, you open your banking app, checking account, $1,100. Next paycheck is 4 days away. There is a familiar tightness, the specific anxiety of a balance that seems lower than it should be given what you earn. You have felt this for years. You have attributed it to lifestyle costs, to the city you live in, to some vague personal failing you cannot quite identify. Then you look at the other screen, the 401k balance, the Roth IRA, the high-yield savings account earning 4.5% that you set up and almost never think about. The brokerage account you funded during the pandemic and have added to steadily since. Add those numbers. The sum is not small. There is a significant gap between what your checking account says about your financial situation and what your actual financial situation is. That gap is the sign, and it is a good sign. Richard Thaler, Nobel Prize in Economics, 2017, the most rigorous behavioral economist of the last 3 decades, spent years studying what he called mental accounting. The way people categorize and treat money differently based on which conceptual bucket it occupies. The finding is almost embarrassingly simple. Money in checking is psychologically coded as spendable. Money in investment accounts is coded as off limits. People treat them as different currencies even though they are the same dollars. And this coding has enormous implications for long-term wealth because available money gets spent. Not always immediately, but eventually. The friction between having money and spending money is nearly zero when the money is sitting in checking, and your brain has classified it as fair game. Wealthy by behavior people, not wealthy by inheritance. Wealthy by accumulated decisions maximize the off-limits pool and minimize the available pool. The checking account stays lean. Not empty, lean. Because lean checking is not a symptom of financial struggle. It is the byproduct of aggressive deployment. Let me give you the numbers that show what this means over time. 2 people, same salary, $88,000 a year, same city, comparable cost of living. Call them Denise and Garrett. Denise automates 22% of her gross income to invested accounts before anything hits, checking roughly $19,000. $360 per year deployed between her 401k and Roth IRA. Her checking account is usually below $2,000. Her friends quietly assume she is either underpaid or bad with money. Her checking account communicates struggle. Garrett contributes 3% to capture the employer match, roughly $2,640 annually. Everything else sits in checking. He regularly has $4,000 to $5,000 available. He feels financially comfortable. He absorbs unexpected expenses without distress. His checking account communicates doing well. Run 30 years at 8% annual return. Denise, approximately $1,460,000 in accumulated wealth from contributions alone before counting employer match or dividend reinvestment. Garrett, approximately $121,000. The gap is $1,339,000. Same salary, same 30 years. The entire gap is the difference between a lean checking account balance and a comfortable one. Denise felt cash poor for 30 years and built $1.4 million. Garrett felt comfortable for 30 years and built $121,000. The comfort cost him $1,300,000 in compounding he never captured. That is not a math trick. That is compound interest doing exactly what it does when the only variable is how much money gets deployed automatically before it can generate a spending decision. Now, let me walk you through a specific case. Because abstract numbers are one thing and a concrete timeline is another. There is a guy named Daniel, 34 years old, Austin, Texas, project manager, $92,000 a year, not a finance person. He has never read a trading book in his life. At 29, he sat down and did one piece of math that he later described as the thing that changed everything for him. Daniel was paying 1.1% in annual fees on his investment accounts through a financial advisor he had inherited from his parents. He had $160,000 saved at the time. 1.1% of $160,000 sounds like $1,760 per year, a rounding error, but he compounded it. Over 30 years at 8%, that 1.1% fee does not cost him $1,760 annually. It costs him approximately $147,000 in compounding returns he never receives because the fee is extracted from the base, and the base is what compounds. The fee is not additive. It is multiplicative in reverse. Daniel moved everything to Vanguard index funds, that year average expense ratio of 0.04%, not 1.1. He automated his 401k contribution to the current $23,000 annual limit. He set up a Roth IRA at the $7,000 limit and funded it on the 1st of January every year. He bought a 2019 Subaru Forester used for $15,200 in cash. His apartment costs $1,350 a month in a city where his colleagues pay $2,000 or more for the right address. 5 years later, his net worth sits at approximately $375,000. His income grew from $81,000 to $92,000 in that period. His lifestyle spend is nearly unchanged. The gap between income and expenses is wide and getting wider every year. His colleagues earn comparable salaries. One recently financed a Tesla Model Y on a 72-month loan. Another bought a house at the absolute ceiling of what the bank approved him for. And just for the record, the bank's approval ceiling is not a financial recommendation. It is the maximum liability the institution is willing to absorb from you, which is not the same thing. Daniel, the project manager driving the used Subaru in a modest apartment, is on track for financial independence at 47. His colleagues will be having the same money conversations at 50 that they are having today. The Subaru is below the waterline. But here's the sign that actually changes the arc permanently. Not the symptom, the mechanism. And the Federal Reserve number I mentioned is about to make this specific sign land differently than anything else I could tell you. Sign 2. You have broken the lifestyle inflation cycle. Let me tell you about Carol first. Carol started teaching elementary school in Columbus, Ohio in 1998. 24 years old, $31,000 a year. She built a life on $28,000. She put $3,000 into a Vanguard S&P 500 index fund and left it alone. Every year after that, when Carol received a raise, she made a specific and deliberate decision. Let a modest portion of the increase adjust for inflation, invest the rest. Not every dollar of the raise, she was not punishing herself. She allowed her lifestyle to improve slowly. She bought a better couch eventually. She took a real vacation eventually. But she refused to let her lifestyle track her income in proportion. By 2002, she was earning $38,000, living on about $31,000. By 2010, she was earning $52,000 and living on around $36,000. By 2020, she was an administrator earning $74,000, living on approximately $42,000. The gap widened every single year. Her colleagues found her confusing. She drove used cars for her entire career. She bought a modest house in 2006 for $192,000 and paid it off in 2018. She took one real trip per year, somewhere she genuinely wanted to go, but one. She did not perform her financial situation online because there was nothing visible to perform. Carol retired at 63 with $1.4 million in investment accounts. Her colleagues, several of whom earned more than she had at peak salary, retired with between $80,000 and $240,000. Same city, same working timeline, comparable income trajectories. The variable was nothing more than whether or not the lifestyle tracked the income. Now, the Federal Reserve number, the Survey of Consumer Finances, the most comprehensive household wealth data collected in the United States, done every 3 years, shows that the median net worth of Americans aged 45 to 54 is $168,600. Pause on that number. Half of all Americans at the absolute peak of their earning years, with 3 decades of employment behind them, have accumulated less than $170,000. The mathematical explanation is not medical emergencies or catastrophic financial events, though those happen. It is the quiet, relentless mechanism of income rising and lifestyle rising to absorb it, leaving almost nothing in the gap to compound year after year. And here's the reversal I want you to hold on to, because I think it is the most important single idea in this entire video. You think the problem is that people do not earn enough. The actual problem is that every time they earn more, the definition of enough moves up to absorb it. If you protect the gap, if you hold the spread between income and spending deliberately open and invest the difference consistently, you will outperform in net worth the median American at peak earning age. Not the bottom of the distribution, the median, the average outcome, starting from a relatively modest salary. The mechanism is the gap itself, not the income level. Here is the loss framing I want to be precise about. Every year that lifestyle inflation closes the gap, you are not failing to save a modest amount. You are removing dollars permanently from the compounding base. At 8% over 25 years, $1,000 today becomes approximately $6,850. Every $1,000 your lifestyle upgrade consumes in a given year is not costing you $1,000. It is costing you $6,850 in wealth you will never build. A $3,000 to $1,000 annual lifestyle upgrade, a slightly nicer apartment, a subscription service you added because you could finally afford it, a lease payment that did not exist the year before, compounded for 25 years, is not $3,000 annually in lost savings. It is over $206,000 in foregone wealth. That is not a rounding error. That is whether your retirement is comfortable or whether you are working at 65 because you have no other option. Now, I want you to meet Marcus, because Marcus is what every number I've given you looks like in reverse. Marcus is 41. He earns $112,000 a year. He leases a BMW 3 Series for $560 a month. He pays $1,800 in rent in a good part of town. He takes 2 international trips per year, some of them charged. He dresses well. He eats at good restaurants. His LinkedIn is impressive. His life, read from the outside, looks like the correct version of success for someone at his income level. His net worth is $37,000. After 12 years of working, his 401k has $22,000 in it. He has contributed the 3% minimum for 12 years to capture the employer match. He carries $11,000 in credit card debt and has $18,000 remaining on a student loan. Marcus is not a cautionary tale about stupidity or moral failure. He is the average, predictable output of a culture that taught him income equals status equals spending, and that the scoreboard is visible consumption. He cannot feel the gap between what he earns and what he keeps, because the culture he lives in has taught him that closing that gap, spending at the level your income permits, is what success looks like. We are going to come back to Marcus. By the way, hit subscribe if you are finding this useful. YouTube's algorithm is genuinely unpredictable and may never surface my videos again if you do not. And this channel is specifically for people building wealth the boring, effective way. A financial advisor once mentioned to me that his wealthiest clients never asked about returns. They asked about fees. His least wealthy clients asked about hot stocks and also, occasionally, whether the boat counted as a home office. In a moment, I am going to get to the third sign, and this is the one that most personal finance content will not touch, because explaining it properly requires describing a mechanism of human behavior that makes everyone look at least a little ridiculous, including the person writing the script. But it is the most expensive line item in most professional budgets, and almost nobody knows it is there because it does not show up as a separate line on your bank statement. First though, understand that what I am about to describe is not about being cheap. It is about recognizing when you are spending money to manage other people's perceptions rather than to improve your own life. Those are genuinely different purchases with genuinely different returns. Sign 3, you have stopped needing the performance. Robert, CPA, Midwest city, late 40s. He drives unremarkable cars, wears unremarkable clothes, lives in a house that does not announce his salary. His office colleagues call him boring, affectionately but sincerely, because that is the most accurate word available for how his life reads from the outside. At age 37, Robert ran a calculation he later described as the most disturbing number he had ever produced in his professional life. And he had produced a lot of disturbing numbers professionally. He estimated, conservatively, that roughly 22% of his discretionary spending over the previous decade had been what he called signal spending. Not purchases made from genuine need or preference, purchases made to communicate something to his social reference group. The car upgrade when the existing car functioned perfectly. The wardrobe shift following a promotion, because the promotion implied a new tier of visible spending. The restaurant choices made for impressiveness rather than preference. He converted that estimate to a dollar figure. Then he compounded what those dollars would have been worth, invested consistently over the same 10-year period at historical market returns. The result was $431,000 in foregone compounding. Not spent on travel that meaningfully expanded how he saw the world, not spent on experiences that deepened his relationships or his understanding of anything, spent on the maintenance of a social signal, on managing other people's impression of him at a cost of $431,000 in retirement. Robert has not made a signal purchase since he ran that number. He retired at 53. Here's the framework behind what Robert discovered empirically. Robert Frank at Cornell, the economist, not the same. Robert has written extensively on positional goods, goods whose primary value derives not from what they do, but from how they compare to what others have. A car that takes you from point A to point B is a functional good. A leased BMW in a professional neighborhood is substantially a positional good. The additional $15,000 to $20,000 over reliable used vehicle is not paying for transportation. It is paying for position in a social comparison hierarchy that has no top level and no natural ceiling. The research shows that positional goods spending escalates as income inequality widens, because as high earners spend more on visible signals, the reference benchmark shifts upward for everyone below them. The arms race has no winner. There's always a more expensive signal available. And the people running hardest to stay competitive in that race frequently end up with the thinnest net worth, because they are deploying the most capital to maintain a position in a contest that does not pay out at the end. 30% of American households earning over $100,000 a year have less than $10,000 in liquid savings. Sit with that for a second. 6 figures of annual income, less than $10,000 saved. The signal spending absorbed the entire margin, the entire compounding base. The retirement, eaten slowly by positional goods over 20 years of 6-figure income. The people who opt out of this, who reach a point where they genuinely do not need the performance, where financial decisions are made by actual utility rather than social signal, are not making a sacrifice. They are making the highest return investment available to them at their income level. Because over a 25-year period, the difference in accumulated wealth between a heavy positional goods spender and a non-spender at identical incomes is not incremental. It is frequently the difference between retiring when you choose and working until you physically cannot. And here is what opting out looks like from the outside. It looks like not living up to your income. Your car is not commensurate with your salary. Your wardrobe is fine but not aspirational. You do not live in the neighborhood that the algorithm would predict for someone at your earning level. People still running the race will read this as financial fragility. They will assume you cannot compete rather than that you have decided not to. That assumption is the Titanic captain steering by the 10% above the waterline. He had no framework for the 90% below. Neither do your colleagues. Neither does Marcus. Marcus, by the way, recently told a mutual acquaintance that he was not really into money stuff because he preferred not to stress about finances constantly. He then spent 45 minutes comparing BMW lease residual values on the model he is planning to take delivery of in 3 months. Now, here is where everything connects. And this is the part most financial content completely misses because it requires talking about behavior rather than tactics. And behavior does not sell subscription products. The first 3 signs are not actually 3 separate things. They are one thing, seen from 3 different angles. The thin checking account is the evidence of deployment. The broken lifestyle inflation cycle is the source of that deployment. The indifference to performance is what makes the broken cycle sustainable for 30 years instead of 6 months before you crack and lease something impressive. They reinforce each other. Remove any one of them and the system weakens. Keep all 3 running together and the compounding becomes, over 2 decades, genuinely violent. And here is the multiplier hiding inside all 3. Behavior compounds. You've heard that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the financial universe. The math is real. $100,000 at 8% doubles roughly every 9 years. Let it run for 30 years and it becomes over $1 million without a single additional contribution. The last 10 years of a 30-year compounding period generate more wealth than the first 20 combined because the base has grown large enough that 8% of it is a large number. What almost nobody discusses is that financial behavior compounds the same way. The first year, you break the lifestyle inflation cycle. You redirect maybe $4,000 or $5,000 extra dollars to investments that previously would have been absorbed by lifestyle. The next year, income ticks up modestly and you move the majority of the increase to investments rather than spending. By year 5, you are contributing amounts that would have seemed impossible in year 1, not because your income jumped dramatically, but because the gap has been widening through accumulated restraint and behavioral momentum. By year 15, the annual investment contribution might exceed your entire starting salary. By year 25, your portfolio is generating monthly returns that dwarf what you contribute annually. And here's what compounds on top of that. The behavior itself becomes self-reinforcing in a way that does not require ongoing discipline. Once you have real numbers in the accounts, once you can watch the balance grow in months, you contributed nothing because the market did the work. The signaling game loses its grip. Not all at once, gradually. The iceberg below the waterline starts to feel more real than the 10% above it. And the more real it feels, the less you spend on performance. The less you spend on performance, the faster the 90% grows. The faster the 90% grows, the less the performance matters. Around and around. This loop, running in the right direction, is the actual wealth building mechanism. Not stock selection, not market timing, not finding the advisor with the proprietary model. The behavioral loop, compounding on itself across decades. Marcus's loop is running in reverse. Every year the lifestyle consumes the income, the accounts stay thin, the net worth barely moves, and the reference point for normal spending creeps slightly higher. If his current trajectory holds through his 50s, he will reach 61 with somewhere between $115,000 and $150,000 in investment accounts, depending on market conditions. His lifestyle will require roughly $8,000 to $9,000 a month to sustain at that point. He will not retire at 61. He will probably not retire at 65 without significant and painful compression of the life he has built. He will be having the same conversation about money at 61 that he is having at 41, except with fewer options, more urgency, and no easy answers. The Honda at the restaurant is not the loser at the table. The Honda is the one that gets to leave when it decides to. 3 practical takeaways, specific ones, calibrated to this situation only. First, calculate your net worth against the Federal Reserve median for your actual age bracket this week, not next month, this week. Under 35, the median American net worth is $13,900. 35 to 44, it is $91,300. 45 to 54, $168,600. If you are above the median for your bracket, you are ahead of the average outcome of the American financial system after decades of earned income. That is your real scoreboard. Not the car in the restaurant parking lot, not the vacation post, the number. Second, Identify one signal expense in your monthly budget this week. One specific thing you pay for that is primarily about how it reads to others, rather than what it functionally does for you. Calculate the annual cost. Compound that annual figure forward 25 years at 8%. That result, that specific dollar amount, is the actual price of the signal, not the monthly payment. The compounded cost of the monthly payment sustained over 25 years. Then decide, with full information, whether the signal is worth that price. Sometimes it genuinely is. Most of the time, when you see the compounded number written out, it is not. Third, build the hole in the floor today. Set one automatic transfer, 401k, IRA, brokerage account, wherever it makes sense in your situation, at an amount that makes your checking account feel lean before your next paycheck. Not broken, not irresponsible, not damaging to your actual obligations. Lean. Lean enough that you notice it. Because that specific discomfort, the one that makes you check your balance on a Wednesday afternoon and feel a quiet anxiety, is not a warning. It is a receipt. It is confirmation that the deployment happened, that the money went below the waterline, that the 90% is growing in the dark where nobody can see it but you and your account statements. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. Marcus just picked up the new iPhone. Financed over 24 months at 0% interest, because technically it costs nothing up front, which is the exact framing that makes this particular financial decision feel sensible while extracting maximum value from the person making it. The Honda is still in the parking lot, paid off. Getting a little worn around the edges, quietly, invisibly, patiently funding a retirement that will not require a conversation about whether it is still affordable. The 90% is always below the waterline. That was never a consolation. That is the entire point.